Is this the true awakening of Lewis Hamilton with Ferrari? Are we seeing the beginning of something historical? Or was it simply a good weekend in Baku? Today I'm going to tell you why Ferrari did not expect this Hamilton, and why Singapore could change everything. No one saw him coming. What happened in the practices of the Azerbaijan 2025 Grand Prix with Lewis Hamilton was an unexpected jolt to the technical and emotional board of Formula One. Until that time, the dominant narrative was clear. Hamilton was having difficulties of adaptation to SF25, the Ferrari car with which he debuted after an entire era of silver was dressed. There was talk of frustration, lack of feeling, even communication errors between pilot and engineers. But Baku broke with all that. The most revealing data came from your own team. At the post-FP2 meeting, one of the engineers acknowledged that Hamilton had stopped 11 meters later than Leclerc in the most technical curve of the layout, without losing traction at the exit. That is not achieved lucky. That is achieved with absolute confidence. And that trust is only obtained when the car responds with surgical precision to each pilot's movement. The most shocking thing was to listen to Hamilton himself to say, "Thanks to the Lord," for the first time in months, in a tone loaded with relief, as if an internal pressure had finally yielded. It was not a phrase thrown into the air, it was an emotional testimony. It was the reflection of weeks of internal frustration, of uncomfortable silences, of accumulated doubts that finally found an escape valve in the form of track performance. This change also has a psychological dimension. Baku was not only a jump in the timetable, but a turning point in the story of his season. There was no longer talk of the Ferrari error when signing it or Hamilton's competitive sunset. Now, at paddock meetings, the question was another. What if this is just the beginning? The engineers know it. They have seen it in the data, in the onboard videos, in the comments of the pilots. And yet, correcting it is a surgical work. Because any attempt to expand the operating window can compromise the global performance of the car in its optimal zone. Ferrari is trapped in a technical dilemma. If the car makes the car more flexible to make Hamilton more friendly, you can lose what makes Leclerc so fast. But if he does not, he runs the risk of missing the talent of one of the most laureate pilots in history. And as if that were not enough, the SF25 suffers with a chronic evil of this generation, the wear of the flat background. When operating so close to the ground to maximize the soil effect, any irregularity in the layout can wear key components, affecting the general balance of the car. The background degrades, the aerodynamic flow is altered, and the car losing performance without the pilots can do anything about it. This has forced Ferrari to limit certain adjustments that could benefit Hamilton, but would aggravate this structural wear. All this makes SF25 a car as fascinating as frustrating. It is a work of art with riding soul. You can win races if everything goes perfect, but you can ruin a whole weekend with only 1/10 of a millimeter difference in the filming height. And in that context, understanding how Hamilton managed to tame him in Baku is not only a talent story, but also of emotional resistance, technical adaptation, and an unwavering will to demonstrate that he can still write his name in Ferrari's gold books. What happened in Baku was not simply a good performance on track. It was the beginning of an internal transformation, of an emotional rebirth in Lewis Hamilton that has begun to redefine its role within Ferrari. Because in Formula One, a pilot not only wins with speed. He wins when his mind, his heart, and his car synchronize at the same frequency. And in Azerbaijan, for the first time since he joined the Scuderia, that happened. Hamilton is not any pilot. It has more than a decade at the top of world motor racing, 7 world titles, records that seemed unattainable, and a reputation built not only by its numbers, but for its capacity for resilience, leadership, and adaptation. But Ferrari is not any team. It is a different universe. An ecosystem loaded with expectations, national passions, and a story that weighs in every corner of Maranello. Hamilton landed to that atmosphere with the weight of the story on his shoulders, knowing that it was not enough to be fast. It had to be the symbol of a new era. At first, it was silence, cautious, measured, more observer than vocal. He didn't want to impose himself or arrive as a star who knows everything. But that doesn't mean he was comfortable. Internally, Hamilton struggled against a frustration that he couldn't openly share. The car did not speak to him. Trust, that intangible so fundamental for an elite pilot, was not. And without trust, there is no speed. There is no magic. What we saw in Baku was the first step of that emotional recovery. When a pilot gets out of the car and thank you aloud, it does not do it by protocol. He does it because he has felt something that he thought was lost. And in the case of Hamilton, that "thanks to the Lord" was not a phrase of spiritual relief. It was a content shout, a valve that released weeks, perhaps months of internal tension. It was the finding that, finally, the car was beginning to answer him. But the most revealing was what was not seen in the times by return. It was the way he walked through the paddock. Your posture. His gaze. It was no longer the Hamilton that analyzed in silence the telemetry leaves with frown. It was the Hamilton that approached the mechanics, who argued with engineers, who transmitted direction. The leader had returned. Not the champion who needs to win to shine, but the one who shines even in adversity when the team needs it. In Ferrari, that felt immediately. The change in his energy infected the environment. Several team members recognized that in technical meetings after Friday in Baku, Hamilton took the floor with more forcefulness. He proposed, he challenged ideas, requested experimentation with confidence. It was there that the pilot who made Mercedes reactivated a dynasty. It's not just driving well. It is about influencing the course of a project. And for Ferrari, Hamilton is not only a sports investment. It is a cultural project. An attempt to break with years of inertia, strategic errors, bright but inconsistent cars. His signing was a statement. We want a winning mentality in the core of the team. But that mentality is not imposed. It is built from mutual trust. And that, in Baku, began to emerge. There is also a symbolic dimension that cannot be ignored. Hamilton, in just his second career dressed in red, led an official session of Formula One. And did so before the eyes of the entire paddock, including his old rivals and his ex-equipo. It was a message not only for Red Bull, McLaren or Mercedes. It was a message for Ferrari. I'm here and I still know how to win. And I will do it in my way, with my methods, with my style, but also with the humility of who knows that this is a new and gigantic challenge. That emotional rebirth, that connection with the car, that return of trust, is what makes Hamilton a real threat. Because when Lewis feels that he has control, when he is convinced that he can make a difference, there is no wall to stop it. And Ferrari knows it. Therefore, from Baku, the atmosphere in Maranello has changed. It is no longer just about waiting for Hamilton to adapt. Now they wonder how much more can grow, and how far they can go together. What Hamilton achieved in Baku was impressive. But in Formula One, a good weekend does not define a season. The paddock knows it, Ferrari knows it, and Lewis too. Therefore, all eyes now go to Singapore. A circuit of maximum demand, technical and mental. A place that, historically, has been a relentless filter between good pilots and the big ones. Marina Bay does not forgive. It is an urban layout with more than 20 curves, without margins of error, with extreme temperature and humidity conditions that even challenge the best prepared athletes. Here, the car not only needs to be fast. You need to be controllable in each millimeter of the asphalt. The car that wins in Singapore will not be the fastest in line, but the one that best behaves under pressure. The one that can maintain stability in braking, efficiency in slow curve, and, above all, proof of return without degrading the tires in excess. For Ferrari, and especially for Hamilton, this is an early final exam. If Baku was a promise, Singapore is validation. It is the perfect setting to demonstrate that the scene was not a flash, but the beginning of a pattern. But it is also a cruel layout for mistakes. A small strategy failure, a bad choice of tires, an incorrect adjustment in the suspension, and all work can collapse. The most challenging thing is that Singapore demands a total level of communication between pilot and engineers. For more than 2 hours of night race, each adjustment counts. The track temperature changes rapidly. The grip evolves with each passing car. Yellow flags are almost inevitable. And in the midst of all that, the team must read the behavior of the car in real time, anticipate the changes of the track, and keep the pilot in the optimal window. Because if Hamilton shines in Singapore, if he manages to compete from you against McLaren, Red Bull or Mercedes in that urban labyrinth, then there will be no more doubts. It will not be just a symbol, nor a commercial bet of Ferrari. It will be a real threat to the title. And in a season as unpredictable as 2025, a pilot like Lewis does not need to start strong. You just need to find the right pace. And from Baku, he seems to have found it. The opportunity is there. Ferrari has before him the possibility of building a truly powerful complementary duo in styles, but linked to objectives. However, achieving that requires egos and firm decisions that historically have not always managed to take. The risk of internal conflict grows with each career in which one of the two pilots feels relegated or ignored. The surprise that Hamilton generated can bother. But it can also be the spark they needed to get out of the structural stagnation that has pursued them for more than a decade. And if instead of resisting that transformation, they embrace it with intelligence, they can be at the gates of something big. What do you think? Do you think Hamilton's performance in Azerbaijan was a clear sign that the SF25 code has deciphered? Or do you still need to see him consolidate his level on a more demanding track like Marina Bay to be convinced? Leave me your analysis in the comments. I want to read your arguments, your predictions, and your doubts. Do you think Hamilton is starting his last great race? Or is it just a mirage? Can Ferrari control this dynamic without falling into the mistakes of the past?